Welcome back to Reading Bear. Today, we will take a look at some new revenge stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
First one is titled, Jerk Boss Commits Tax Fraud, Gets a Hefty Fine. This happened in the year 2018. Me being your typical 18-year-old, I was now going to be an independent man. So I searched for jobs and finally found one advertising the need for an account with a $100 monthly pay. I'm from a third world country, so this amount was huge. So I went to the place, and apparently I was to stay in a warehouse keeping stock of what household appliances we sold, what we ordered from our factory. The owner had his own factory and a retail shop too, but I was in the warehouse, which would occasionally sell small household stuff to customers too. So needless to say, I got the job and it was going great for the first few months. The boss was too nice to be true, even letting me go home early sometimes. Then he revealed his true colors. Slowly he started to be more violent to me. He never physically harmed me, but he used to keep on scolding and ranting for hours. Even if I hadn't committed any mistake, I would be scolded every day. I was just sucking it in every day. He'd come to the warehouse after a fight with his wife, and then I would be the one who he would take out his anger on. Eventually, he would order me around for more things rather than just accounting. He'd make me work along with the laborers and give no extra pay, make me go buy anything he needed. Be it his medications or even just candies for him to take home to his kids. But one day I just had enough when he asked me to clean the toilet because it was stinking and dirty. I just straight up said, it's not my job, I'm only here for the account. From that day, he would torture me even more, and now I just had to do something. So the revenge. During my 8 months or so of working there, I had figured out a lot of things about his business. He had a dummy industry registered, and if he had any stock of goods left, he would just order me to make it look like we sold the goods to the dummy industry. He claimed to be at a loss when we were to pay income taxes. He'd show he was in loss with fake documents of his employees and laborers being paid more salary, factory and warehouse rent, even if the whole place was his and he had to not pay rent. Show that he sold goods at an extremely low price. I could go on and on, but you understand what I mean. I had a lot of dirt on this guy's company, so now I thought of the easiest way to duck him up. I called the IRS and let them know of an anonymous tip of my boss's company who was committing fraud and evading taxes. Hell broke loose after this. The IRS came to investigate, and since my boss didn't want to get into even more trouble with having me as an accountant with not enough qualifications, I was sent home, and the manager posed as the one who handled the account as well. I was told from my labor friends that the company was investigated and all the secrets were revealed. My boss wasn't going to get jail time, typical third world country, but he was to pay a hefty fine of about $10,000. I quit without ever returning to work after the investigation. Last I've heard, the boss did pay the fine and hired a new accountant, but he's now an honest man. Next one is titled, She Ladybugged His Car. Back in my early 20s, I was working a shitty job in the mall. I'd only been working there for about a month when I was promoted to keyholder over a guy who started before me. The dude had been a real flake as long as I'd known him, so I wasn't surprised. Apparently, he'd been promised the position and was really upset at me. For the next month, he was a huge dick to me. Swiping sales, complaining to the manager about me, slyly ducking up cleaning projects or displays I had done, and informing the manager that I'd failed to do something. After a full month of his crap, I eventually snapped. At a few of the local plant nurseries, you can buy jars of ladybugs for $10. I bought 3, which was somewhere between 2,000 and 5,000 ladybugs. I swiped his keys from the break room while I was on lunch, found his cute new Saturn, and dumped all 3 containers on the floor of his back seat. We closed together that night, so we ended up walking out to the parking lot together after dropping the cash off at the deposit box. I was parked further out, so he got to his car before I did, and I was able to get a peek at my handiwork. It looked like something from a horror film. The ladybugs had swarmed the entire inside of his car, and in the dim light, you couldn't really tell what they were, only that the car was full-on infested with bugs. The dude had a complete breakdown right there in the parking lot, just absolutely lost his mind. I enjoyed the scene at first, but the longer it went on the worse I felt. After he calmed down enough to start making sense, he barreled into this monologue about how he was sure it was the girl from the pretzel stand because he'd been such a huge a-hole to her, and he starts crying. He goes on about how he deserves this for being so awful, and then apologizes to me for being such a dick, and keeps going on about how he brought this on himself. It was pretty bad. I offered him a ride home, now feeling really guilty, and when I dropped him off he thanked me for being so nice to him, despite all the awful stuff he'd done. He said his mother was undergoing cancer treatment and it wasn't going well. Oof. He apologized again and I didn't see him for a few days. Crap between us at work improved a lot, but I still felt guilty as ever. He had to sell the car a few months later because the Texas heat had killed all the ladybugs and he couldn't get the smell of them out of the vehicle. His mum died a little while after that and he ghosted the job. I still think about that dude even now. The revenge felt so righteous when I did it, but afterward, it was nothing but guilt. Next one is titled, "My Ex Cheated on Me on My 21st Birthday." This story occurred more than a few years ago. I am originally from the USA where drinking age is 21. I had been working in sports bars as the front-end manager for a bit, so my 21st birthday was counted down for. I was excited to start bartending. At the time I worked full-time while in school, living in rural Washington state, so it takes 5+ hours to get to Seattle. I'd been dating this guy, mostly long-distance relationship, for 3 months or so. He had come down from Seattle to where I live, met my family, some friends, and colleagues from the bar I worked at the time. Everything seemed to be going fine. Anyhow, about 3 weeks before my 21st, I asked him if he thought it would be a nice idea for me to come visit him in Seattle for my birthday. I thought it'd be nice to try out some bars, maybe go to some clubs. He seemed into the idea, and agreed. I scheduled some time off work for the trip. I confirmed with him that the trip still worked for him. A couple days before I planned on leaving, everything was a go. The day before my birthday, I drive up to see him. He introduced me to Postmates, which I've never used before, coming from a small town. I paid for both of our meals, which I did think was a little weird for me to do as a guest on my birthday, but I let it slide. I hadn't actually wanted to order in, I wanted to go out to eat, but he said he was tired. We had a bottle of wine after and called it a night, not exactly what I had pictured for the evening before my 21st, but whatever. The next day, he suggested we get pizza. I like pizza, but I have celiac disease and didn't want to spend a bunch of time on the toilet that day, so I made some suggestions that offered gluten-free pizzas. He turned them all down and insisted we go to this pizza place he liked. I reluctantly agreed. We spend most the day chilling at home, even though at this point I had voiced that I wanted to bar hopping. He brushed me off. Later that same day, he said one of his friends had broken up with her girlfriend, and that he should go be there for her. He didn't invite me, so I told him the generic answer, if that's what you really feel like you should be doing right now, you know, on my birthday. I was obviously getting increasingly frustrated at this point, but I figured it was better to let him go than have him spend the day with me if he didn't want to be with me on my birthday. I had thought he would be gone for maybe a few hours. But nah, this witch was out all night with her, tagging his location with her at various clubs all ducking night. He didn't text me even though I tried to get a hold of him multiple times, so at some point in the night I'm livid and super sad at his apartment, alone with his roommates, whom I did not know. Luckily, they were really nice. They said they didn't realize I was his girlfriend, and that he had had other girls over previously in the past couple weeks. I ended up getting absolute wasted with them, opened a bottle of 151 I had been saving, and took all the fancy ice cubes out of his trays in the freezer. He had Mario, and various other special trays, and purposefully didn't refill anything. He never returned that night. I ended up crying myself to sleep alone that night. The next morning, I woke up late, around 11, and he still wasn't home. I was so upset that I had wasted my birthday with this fool who clearly didn't care about me at all, especially when I had plenty of friends at home who would have loved to spend it going out with me. At this point I'm sitting in the apartment alone, thinking about what I can get away with without getting in any legal trouble. My ex was someone who loved to collect Legos, expensive themed socks running up $20 a pair, gaming consoles, figurines, and he always bragged that there wasn't a hot sauce spicy enough for him. So he had the hottest one on the market in his fridge. I obviously wasn't going to throw his gaming consoles out the window, because I would surely get in trouble for that. So I got creative. I surely wouldn't forget the dude who ruined my 21st, so I had to give him something to remember me by. I took all his expensive, happy socks, and cut just the toes out of them, so every time he put a pair on he would be disappointed to find his toes came out. I left Legos in the toes of all his shoes on the ground. I put hot sauce in his body wash and toothpaste. I rearranged all his figurines. I cut nipple holes in his favorite shirt he had just been bragging about. I left a hole in his new boxers big enough for him to fall through. Then I gathered what was mine. It was about 13:30 and I hadn't heard from him, and I left. Important to note, he didn't share a bathroom with his roommates. I had made sure what I did didn't have any unintentional victims. He later texted me when he got home bitching I had cut up $600 worth of socks of underwear and don't think I didn't notice the other weird crap you did. No apology whatsoever about leaving me behind on my birthday. He never did. Next one is titled, Teacher Makes False Claim of Me Faking an Injury, So My Mum Messes With Her Career. I, 15 female, have had a long and elaborate history with injuries, especially breaking my arm. Starting from literally the day I was born, my health has been complicated. I have a few conditions but none serious enough to impact my daily life as I know it. I have a very weak immune system and somewhat easy to break bones. On top of that, I am the definition of clumsy, and I'm also a huge idiot who gets herself into dangerous situations for fun. My mum, 40 female, has obviously known me from birth and knows just the extent of my weird bad luck and health issues. I've broken my arms a collective 13 times over my entire life, and almost every time I got injured or sick, it seems somebody had something to say about it. I don't know why, but teachers just love to say that students that get hurt often are attention-seeking fakers, and a lot of relationships with authority figures have been harmful because of this. Every time it's the same. For some reason a teacher doesn't believe me, they call me a liar in front of everyone, I get bullied for a while, and then I have to try and prove that I'm not faking. I could post so many stories about teachers doing this, but this is a story about the time my mum actually managed to get revenge. This all took place around 7th grade. I was 12 at the time and I had broken my wrist by climbing on top of something I wasn't supposed to and then falling off like a dumbass. My wrist was in a Velcro cast since I'm very allergic to the regular cast material, as they figured out through many cases of trial and error. My teacher, let's call her Mrs. Tablet since this took place while we were learning about Egyptian tablets. She taught history and our personalities clashed a bit. I'm more of a creative, adventurous, freethinker type and she was very conservative, by the book, and proper. We hadn't had any real issues before this, but we just didn't mesh well. She was absent one day and we had a sub in. I knew the sub as one of my teacher's friends and one of my bully's mum. I didn't like her, but I was still respectful in class and just tried to get my work done. She got me in trouble for doodling on my paper once or twice, but other than that everything was fine, or so I thought. The next day I went into class like usual. We were working on an assignment about Egypt and their tables when Mrs. Tablet called me over to her desk. I went over, thinking she'd just get onto me for drawing on the back of my homework or something, only to get bombarded with a bunch of really weird questions. The interaction went something like, "Teacher. So, Fire, do you know why I've called you up here? I know Fire isn't my Reddit name, but it's my IRL nickname, so I'm using it here." Me, "No ma'am, I can't say that I do." Teacher, "How long have you had that cast?" Me, "About a week now, why?" Teacher, "Do you really need that cast?" Me, "Yes." Teacher, "Well, the substitute told me she saw you take it off." Me, it's a cast, I can't take it off, and it would hurt. Teacher, so if I asked the class they'd say you need that cast. Me, yes. Teacher, and if I called your parents right now they'd say the same thing. Me, yes, they were the ones to take me to the hospital. And she did this in front of the whole class. I was eventually dismissed and people looked at me weird for the rest of class. As I later learned, apparently the substitute had told Mrs. Tablet that I'd taken off my cast as soon as I left class. I didn't, and that I threw it in my locker like, ha ha ha, I'm getting away with doing less work. So basically she pretended I was a bad guy in a crappy high school movie. I don't know why she said this, but it had my teacher convinced that I was a liar and a fake. I technically could remove my cast since it was Velcro, but that would have been extremely painful, and it's not like I could just walk around without it. I wasn't going to make a big deal about it at the time, but it turns out she was serious about calling my parents. But she made the mistake of calling my mum. Now me and my mother don't have a perfect relationship. She has anger issues, so we don't always get along well, but she loves me very much and doesn't let people like this mess with me if she can stop it. According to my mum, Mrs. Tablet called her all cocky and said things like, apparently your daughter is wearing a cast, did you know that? And, well, we all know how dramatic teenage girls can be. Especially unique kids like her. She apparently even threatened to have me suspended before my mum stopped her and tore her to shreds for talking about her child like that. I don't think I'm allowed to repeat what was said, but by the end, Mrs. Tablet had to retreat with her tail tucked between her legs. She started being even more cold to me after that day and started giving me unfair detentions for not sitting still and doodling on the side of my worksheets. Even then, outside of school we went to the same art studio sometimes. Weird that someone who hates art so much likes to paint, and poisoned the art director against me and got me put into a lower class. When my mum found out about this, she started the real revenge. My mum has never been a PTA mum. She honestly can't stand most of the PTA members, and their kids are chosen as favorites at my school and use this power to bully others, including me and my friends. My mum is however friends with a very lovely woman on the county's school board, which has more power than the PTA. She told her friend everything that had happened and supplied all the doctor's notes needed to prove I needed my cast. Her friend managed to convince the rest of the board that Mrs. Tablet was discriminating against an impaired student given her comments about me being slower at work and just wearing the cast to slack off, along with detentions related to me not sitting still when she knew I had nervous movements and slight ADHD. At the art studio, my mother pulled me from the classes. I took it upon myself to inform the fellow kids about why, and rumors spread quickly. Soon enough kids were getting pulled left and right, and my art teacher was pulling at strings to try and get the situation under control. I actually think the studio went into temporary closure before reopening again. She was suspended for a week to go under investigation, and it turns out she treated a lot of the unique, as she put it, students in a similar way. She was verbally reprimanded by 2 different departments, and instead of getting her standard raise over the next 3 years, she'll only get half of that. Not only that, but she had to retake a course on how to properly treat students, and if she's ever caught to cross this line again, she'll lose tenure. She'll just be getting her bonus back at the start of next school year, and I'd just like to say that I hope she learned her lesson. Edit, I had misremembered the punishment given to that teacher. Upon asking my mum to retell the story, I fixed it to make it accurate. Thank you to the Redditor that pointed out the mistake. I suppose that my 12-year-old self remembered a raise as a bonus for some reason. Next one is titled, Revenge is a Dish Best Served Cold, Dad. This is a story about how petty my family is. Growing up in my house was a series of loving, harassment and practical jokes. If you are a part of my family, you can fully expect that at some point in your life, the cousins will duck with you in some way, shape or form. Anyway, one year when I was younger, my cousin decided it would be fun to keep unhooking the tailgate on my dad's Ford Bronco. Every time my dad would get in his truck and make a turn, that tailgate would swing open, and after a while it started to upset my dad. He told my cousin to stop doing, which didn't matter because my cousin is in a hole, and just did it more. Anyway, a couple years later my dad saw his opportunity. My family is full of bikers and pretty edgy guys, and I don't know what my cousin was involved in at the time, but somebody was looking for him and he was paranoid about it. He made the mistake of telling this information to another cousin of mine, and it got back to my dad. My dad starts calling his house and sending him letters pretending to be the people that were after him. My cousin evacuated his family, had a loaded gun in every room in his house, and was puking daily with some serious diarrhea from all of the stress. This was probably 10 years ago at this point, and he still has no idea that my dad was involved. Can only hope my dad's evil genius rubbed off on me. Next one is titled, She Was Just an 18-year-old Single Mother. Some girl hit my car in a hit and run. There was a witness to the crime, so the police were able to track her down. When I was asked if I wanted to press charges, I went for it. Turns out she had no license or insurance. She kept trying to fight the charges but wound up getting sued by my insurance, having to pay me restitution via the court system, and 4 separate charges between all her crimes, all of which included a decent fine. She was some 18-year-old single mum. I felt super bad by the end of it. Edit to add details, the damage wasn't significant. There was a small dent and a large scratch. It was all cosmetic damage. My deductible was small, but the total bill to my insurance was about $3 grand. My car is over 10 years old and had some other scratches already. I was way more upset that someone hit me and drove off than I was about the actual damage. I wouldn't have even bothered to get it fixed if the girl hadn't driven off. By pursuing her and pressing charges was 100% fueled by revenge, and her life got pretty ducked up from it. Yeah, what she did wasn't right, but I can emphasize with her being a scared 18-year-old who made a bad choice while caught up in the moment. Also, I'm not justifying her behavior because she had a kid, but it does make me feel bad for her. Being a single parent, as a woman or man, is a really expensive thing, and having a bunch of fees on top of that financial burden has got to suck. Last one is titled, I Almost Cost Someone Their Job. One time I saw a truck with the typical, how's my driving? Call XXX. So I call and tell them that the guy was driving erratically because 16-year-old me thought that would be hilarious. The lady on the other end sounded like she was writing stuff down, and I started to panic, realizing that I may be screwing with the driver's livelihood. So mid-conversation I dropped the phone on purpose and pick it up and deepen my voice to say, this is foreseeable past's dad. Apparently he thought it'd be funny to call the number on the back of your trucks as a prank. The lady was understanding and said that it's nothing to mess around with, as they take driving safety very serious. I continued to feel bad, so I told her that my son would like to apologize, so I dropped the phone again and apologized in a regretful way and then hung up. Probably the most elaborate, stupidest thing I've ever done. Thanks for listening.